Students, welcome to CEC online session. After having discussed about the stage of sales presentation and demonstration in detail, we would now be talking about the next important stage in the personal selling process, that is negotiating sales resistance and handling of objections. Now students, even after careful planning of the sales presentation and demonstration, it is quite probable that prospects still not embrace the sales proposition and may want further reassurance before making any commitment with the company. Salespeople therefore have to understand that this is a normal part of the buying selling process, and therefore all the objections being raised by the prospects should be handled and answered to in a careful manner. We also deliberated in the preceding session as to what can be the possible reasons why the prospects raise objections. And we discussed that when the product is new or unfamiliar, or when the prospect does not have a very clear understanding of the product's features or its benefits, they tend to raise objections about the same. Also, it is seen that when the prospect's prior experience with the product has not been very satisfying, they tend to raise objections with respect to the product or the brand in future. It can also happen that the prospect consider the entire sale call to be unwanted, or the fact that salesman they offer make tall or exaggerated claims, because of which the prospect either want to postpone the purchase or they do not want to buy, can be some of the other reasons why the prospects raise an objection and say no to the purchase. However, even when customers pose objections during the presentation or when you ask them for an order, it is important to clearly understand and welcome these kind of objections, because in fact they indicate that the prospect at least has some interest in the salesman's proposition. Objections can be understood in different ways, or in other words, students, we can say that there could be different types of objections. Let us discuss each one of these types of objections in little more detail. The first type or the nature of objection is the stated and hidden objections. Now, how or on what basis we have categorized the objections as stated or hidden? Prospects may state their objections to a proposition openly and give a salesperson a chance to answer them. This is a kind of an ideal circumstance because everything is out in the open and the salesperson does not need to read the prospect's mind. Now, what happens is, unfortunately, in many instances, prospects, they tend to hide their real reasons for not buying. They don't come up with the real reasons why they are not giving their commitment. Besides having hidden objectives, therefore, their stated objectives may be phony. Unless the real barrier or real deterrent to the sale is determined or can be identified by the salesperson, he cannot make any efforts to overcome the same. Now, the trainee salespeople should know that there are two major techniques for discovering the hidden objectives. The first way is to keep the prospects talking by asking certain kind of probing questions. So when you ask them questions that probe their thinking process, you as a salesman also tend to get some idea as to what probably is holding the prospect back from placing the order. The second technique would be to use the insights gained through the experience in selling the product combined with the knowledge of the prospect's situation to perceive the hidden objection. So, making use of these two techniques, it can still be possible for the salesperson to know more about the reasons due to which the prospect may not be placing a order or calling it a close. The second type of objections are the sincere objections and the insincere ones. So on the basis of sincerity, again, we can classify the objections as sincere or insincere. Now, where the sincere objections can be traced to incompleteness or inaccuracy or vagueness in sales presentation, because of which, see, things are not very clear to the prospect, and therefore they raise an objection that, okay, we haven't understood each and everything because the information which was being provided to us was either inaccurate, or it was incomplete, or it was ambiguous. Now, prospects may not recognize the nature of their needs, or they may have certain kinds of doubts about the appropriateness of the products to them, or the appropriateness of the products in taking care of their needs and requirements, or in terms of providing a solution to their problem. Now, sincere objections are overcome by patient approach and through a proper explanation. Also, in sincere objections, the prospects, they are required to elaborate certain aspects of their presentations, and they are used by the prospects to discourage the salespersons, or to, in some of the situations, also get rid of them, or to test their competence, and as false excuses for not buying. Okay. Now, the general strategy in handling such kind of objections could be to avoid an argument at any cost, because if you enter into any kind of an argument with the prospect, that is one of the surest way to lose a sale. So instead of getting into an argument, one should try to decipher the extent to which the objection being raised insincere or not, and to what extent it can now be handled by way of explanation by the salesman. The third kind of objections that we generally find, they relate to the objections concerning the price and the product. Now, again, objections related to the price can be one of the two categories. One where the prospect is saying that he feels he cannot pay a certain amount of price for the product, or he feels that the product's price is too high for what is being offered to him in return. Now, each of these aspects have to be countered by the salesperson in a different manner. Where you cannot afford the price of the product, probably the salesman can then look into the possibility of providing some sort of discounts to that particular prospect in order to encourage him to place the order. In the other situation where he feels that the price is too high, you can again counter it by saying that even if the price tends to be on the higher side, but then the company or the brand is providing the benefits or the advantages which clearly outweigh the cost or the price being charged for it. So depending on what kind of price objection is being laid by the prospect, you have to come up with a strategy to overcome it. Along with this, as it has been mentioned here, there could be objections related to the product. Now, these include the prospect's concern about the quality of the product, or its design, size, color, packaging, and so on and so forth. Now, these are the objections which again can be answered best if the salesman has got a complete information about the product. He has got a complete product knowledge, not only of the product that is being sold by his company, but also by the competing firms, so that he can at times provide a comparative evaluation of the products in order to have that kind of an argument going in favor of his company's brand. So by comparing the two brands and by emphasizing the superiority of his brand over the competing offerings or over the other offerings available in the market, he can handle this objection. Another type of objections that are being encountered in practical life, they relate to procrastinating objections. Now, these are usually very difficult to overcome. Some such objections include, like, I want to have a talk with my family. Let's say I would like to wait for some more time because before I place the order, or I want to just have a look at the other items also that are available in the market. Now, how you would get around these kind of objections? Because these are generally the reasons which the prospect use as excuses for not acting on the preposition immediately. Okay, so the salesperson who can be put off with such objections loses too many sales to the competitor, who is more perceptive, and who is more responsive to such kind of excuses. So the strategy in this case should not be to let the prospect go. Rather, you should deal with these kind of objections in a very tactful manner, and should be very much prepared well in advance to counter each one of them. And in subsequent session, we would be learning about some such methods that can be used to handle the objections. So now, students, after having learned about the kind of objections and the nature of the objections that may be posed at the salespeople, now let us understand the ways in which they can be handled. The first and the foremost thing that you have to understand at this stage is that it is very important for the salesman to maintain a positive approach no matter what. So you can at any point of time ask the buyer to clarify the objection, what exactly it is going on in his mind, what exactly is the problem area, what is the root cause of the objection. You may question the buyer in a way so that the buyer himself would come up with an answer to his or her own objection. So it's a try to figure out what kind of response and what kind of solution the buyer is looking at, and whether or not it is possible at your end to provide him with that kind of a solution which would work in terms of handling that objection. Another way, broadly, in broad sense, you can always deny the validity of objection. But then again, students, one has to understand that you can go for a denial strategy only when you have very strong grounds of denying the same. When you are very sure that the objection being raised has no such strength or basis. Okay. And then, like, at the very least, an effort can always be made by the salesperson to ensure or to make such efforts whereby you can turn the objection into the very reason for buying. So this was the objection, and now you make that as one of the strong reasons that will motivate the buyer to buy. So if we now try to classify these various objection handling methods, we would find that there are some ways in which this objective can be attained. The first method which is being used is the direct denial method, which is also known by the name head on, because you take it head on, or you contradict what the prospect has to say about it. Now, many sales trainees, they contend that salesperson should never contradict the buyer. You usually consider the buyer to be the king. You generally hold your prospect or customer in a state of a very important being, and therefore you do not appreciate this kind of an approach where you are contradicting the prospect, because usually what happens is this kind of contradiction also tends to stir up antagonism. Okay, the prospect might feel that you are going against him, and the entire situation would turn out to be even more difficult in terms of gaining the prospect's agreement. So you won't, if he is to feel that you are going against him and you are just denying him outrightly, then he would have no reason to continue his interaction with the salesperson. So this kind of view held by the trainee salespeople is generally correct, but in many circumstances, um, it has also been seen that the direct method turns out to be an effective approach. And if a salesperson handles the direct denial method properly, it may well actually impress the prospect with the salesperson's absolute sincerity and belief in what he is selling. So it's a, you have to stick to your guns. You have to say, no, you are wrong, this product does not have this kind of a problem, and that is something which is going to reflect your sincerity and your confidence. However, before directly denying that thing, the sales representative should keep in mind certain aspects. So say this should act as certain warning signals. One, the salesperson must be earnest but not offensive. You should be clear, you should be honest, but at the same time you should be approaching the customer with a smile, not a frown. So your purpose is not to offend but to stick to your point. Okay? Be assertive about your point. Second thing is that if the prospect is extremely sensitive or fond of his own opinions, direct denial will probably be a serious offense. Because we have seen those category of prospects where they hold everything that they say very important to them, so they have that kind of an ego about them. So if they are very sensitive that, okay, whatever I have stated cannot go wrong, and you deny that particular prospect, then the entire situation actually goes on a different kind of a track altogether. Third piece of caution here is that direct denial is better in reply to an objection put in the form of a question than to the one phrased as a declaration of opinion or a statement of fact. So if you deny by raising an objection to which then the prospect would provide an answer, that would be somewhat better way of phrasing it, rather than straight away saying, no, I don't agree with you. And the last caution that would emerge is that this kind of approach, largely students should not be used if the objection has any ego involved in it, maybe by from any of the side. So even from the prospect side or from the salesperson side, if you think that this is something which is related to an ego or is becoming an ego issue, then you should never resort to this kind of a direct denial strategy. Now, this method may occasionally be employed when objection raised is a false one. It should be regarded as probably a desperate remedy for a desperate disease, not to be attempted except only in a situation which absolutely demands it, or by an expert salesperson in a circumstances where it would be likely to give you some sort of a succeeding results or some sort of successful outcome. Now, after having discussed about the direct denial, the second way of dealing with the objections or handling the objections is indirect denial method. Now, this is also seen as one of the chief weapons, so to say, which are used in meeting most important objections. Not only does it remove the idea from the prospect's mind in an inoffensive manner, but also is considered to be more courteous way of handling the objections in comparison to the direct denial approach. So the sales representative does not, in this case, usually meet the prospect's objections head on. But what you try to do, the salesperson gives ground a trifle before replying, saying, you are quite right in saying that it is often true, but in this particular case, or in the case of my brand, or in the case of this particular product, there is a exception. So this kind of an approach can be used in order to counter or handle the objection, and this can be used in all all such cases where the objection may be shown to be inapplicable to the product or the proposition that is being offered by the salesperson. The third important way of dealing with the objection, students, is the boomerang method. Now what happens in case of boomerang? It comes back. So this is also known as a translation method. So you translate it and you let him know the other kind of a situation. So why this is called boomerang? Because the objection that is being hurled by the prospect, or that is being raised by the prospect, it comes back as a reason why he should buy. So you, as I told you in one of the broad strategies, the tact is to turn the tables on the prospect only. So you turn around the objection, and just like a boomerang, it comes back. You give the same objection as the very reason to the prospect to be making a purchase. Now why this is called translation? Also because it translates an your objection, or converts the objection into a reason for making a effective purchase. And it is obviously turns out to be effective only in the hands of a skilled persuader, who can persuade you to still go ahead with the objection when the objection does exist, and you know that this is something which you have to turn as the very reason for making a purchase by the prospect. The fourth method that can be used to counter the objections is the compensation method. Now, this compensation method of handling the objections is generally used by the salesman where the objection is perfectly valid and true and must be admitted. So, in a way, we can say that this method of handling objections is based on the broad principle you can't have everything. So there may be some exceptions whereby the product would be lacking, or which could result into these kind of objections, because no product is a perfect kind of a thing. You can't have everything. So if this is the objection that you have to compromise on, yet the product would be worth making a purchase. So if the wheelbase of the car is too short for easy riding, the compensating feature that you can talk about is that it handles and parks more easily. So are you getting? So we are turning it, we are admitting it that yes, this is what is going to be the problem, but yet at the same time, this is what that can be presented as one of the advantages also, or as one of the resultant benefits. Now the underlying fact is that there is no product which is going to fit into all the situations. All the products have one limitation or the other. No product is perfect, and there always exists some feature of the product or the other which you can always object to. So fundamentally, what the salesperson is trying to convey here, he's trying to convey that the product will give the prospect what is really required, what is the real solution to the problem, and what it does not give is perhaps not really important at all, and therefore can be compromised on and can be ignored in that situation. The fifth method, students, that I would like to talk about in handling the objections is the question method. Now again, you are going to question back. You are going to raise certain questions to the objections which are being raised by the prospect. You need to understand that this kind of a question method is used in three situations. First, when the objection is vague, it's not very clear, it's very general, so much so that you are not sure just what it is going on in the prospect's mind. It may be employed to force the prospect to qualify the objection further, to elaborate on it further, because this is something which is not very clear to you. The situation is still ambiguous. The second situation when you can use this kind of a question approach is to show the lack of logic in the objection raised. So it's like, can you exemplify, can you elaborate, because still the things do not have that kind of a logical reasoning. The third situation is that it can be used to have the prospect answer his own objections, that okay, what is really posing a problem to you, and how do you think, what kind of a situation or what kind of a product do you think would ease your discomfort or would take care of this kind of an objection, and then let the prospect do the talking. The question why, so to say, would force the prospect to talk and engage his attention and the thought process, and learning from that, getting insights from that, you can come up with your own arguments to handle that objection or to come up with the counterpoints. Another method here which is used, though may not be too much appreciated, is the pass up method. So it's when the objection is very, you don't consider it to be important, it is trivial kind of an objection, doesn't make lot of a difference, so it actually does not require a very careful answer. But if you just let it pass, then again the prospect may uh, uh, be offensive about it. So even though it does not actually require the salesperson's handling or any sort of an answering, you just try to pass it off by stating that this is something which is not that important and it is the product's core purpose that is being served, and this is something that does not deserve the recognition of the buyer also. This is something that can really be ignored, like for example color. So I may present as a salesman 3 different colors to you, and you are bent on the 4th one. So obviously the 4th color which is not available at that point in time can very much be ignored and can be passed off. So the objection related to you don't have the product in many colors can really be passed off, saying that these are the most sought after colors and the product is available in all the common colors or all the popular colors. The last method is the yes method. So it's a, what you are doing here, as you would see, it's a complete contradiction to the very first method of direct denial. Here you accept it, you admit it. So this is also considered to be a very popular way of handling the objections, which is based on the salesperson's agreement to the objection. You agree that yes, this problem exists, this objection exists. At the same time, you also, as a salesman, try to make a statement which would offset the objections. Like as I mentioned earlier, that though our prices may be a little on the higher side, but this particular brand has never compromised on quality, or this particular brand is going to last many years longer and therefore is going to give you much more durability in comparison to other products which are non-durable but at the same time are more affordable in comparison to this brand. So you admit it, but at the same time you also give a logical reason behind that particular objection being raised, and then let the buyer or the prospect himself decide whether he would like to go ahead with that kind of an argument or not. And most of the situation, it is seen that when you admit it and you say yes, but also back it up, also support your argument with logical reasoning, the prospects tends to understand the situation and they are more appreciative of the fact that you admitted it, and therefore show an openness in giving their commitment and buy the product. So students, in this particular session we have learned about the various types of objections and how the salesman can handle each one of them by using different methodologies. I'm sure at the end of the session you would have gained clarity on this particular stage of the personal selling process. In the subsequent session, we would be moving ahead with the next stage in the selling process. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay protected.